You don't want to make these 7 hip pain mistakes. I see people make them all the time and it just results in more hip pain in the long run. So let's make sure you don't make these mistakes. Let's get ready to think right, move right, and feel right. I'm Matt Chu from Upright Health, and I've been helping myself and others with hip pain since 2007. If you don't want to miss out on other videos that'll help you with your hip pain, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And now let's talk about the very first mistake. Mistake number 1 is stopping all movement. Doctors will tell you that if you move your hips, you're going to destroy your bones and everything's going to get worse. They might tell you that you'll get way more damage. You might tear something. They are plain wrong. What happens if you stop moving your hips, you stop using the muscles, you stop stretching and strengthening them, you atrophy. And guess what? Atrophy aches. I've had this advice given to me from medical professionals multiple times in my life. Doctors told me at the age of 22 that I had used up my knee and that it was just going to hurt for the rest of my life, so I had to stop using it. Of course, that really didn't sound too good. I also had a doctor in my mid-30s tell me, yeah, you have hip arthritis, so you shouldn't use your hips at all anymore. No jumping, no kicking, no lifting weights, no nothing, because if you do it, you're going to wreck your hips and you're going to need a hip replacement earlier. I'm now in my early 40s and I can tell you confidently that that advice is just total BS. If you are told to stop moving any joint in your body, guess what's going to happen? It's going to die. That's what happens when you stop moving your body. That's what happens when you stop moving any body part. If you don't use it, you lose it. So stopping all movement just to try to protect yourself is just going to end up giving you more hip pain. You need to do something different. And while we're on this topic, have you been given this advice too? Was it about your hips or something else? Drop me a comment down below. The number 2 mistake is obsessing over the medical diagnosis and trying to find the perfect medical diagnosis. I made a video where I talked about this a little more in detail that I'll link to in the description box. But the general idea is this: if you focus all your energy on trying to find the correct diagnosis, you're still going to end up with more hip pain, because the treatments for all of the hip pain diagnoses is the same as what we talked about in mistake number 1, and that's to rest. Don't use your hips. Don't use your hips, and submit your hips to surgery that has highly questionable success rates. I have made many videos that look at different hip surgeries and their success rates. I have resources on dysplasia and hip impingement, and I will one day start looking at hip replacement surgery as well. And when you look at things like dysplasia and hip impingement surgeries, you see that the results are just not that good. Same thing for hip labral tears. You can see that when you do these surgeries, you actually create more damage and increase the likelihood that you're going to need to do something more drastic to try to get rid of the hip pain. Well, that's if you listen to the surgeons, who are always happy to sell you another surgery. Just remember that what shows up in x-rays and MRIs has never been shown to correlate to symptoms. People can have bone-on-bone, grade 4 osteoarthritis in their hips and still have no symptoms. People can have lots of hip pain and show no signs of arthritis on an x-ray. The correlations aren't there. People have hip labral tears all the time in high numbers and have no symptoms, no hip pain. People with hip pain can have no labral tears. The correlations aren't there. The supposed causes of your hip pain are just not proven, and those structural issues are way outside your control, but there are things that you can control that can actually make your hip pain go away. That brings us to mistake number 3, and that's ignoring flexibility. This is very common for men who feel like, yeah, as long as I can deadlift and squat and do sprints, my hips are healthy and I am strong and awesome. But you don't focus on maintaining a full range of motion by doing the same 3 or 4 exercises, and pretty soon over time you realize that it hurts to reach your shoelaces, it hurts to do things simple like bringing your knee to your chest, it hurts to do all kinds of normal daily activities because you have overtrained a few muscles and completely ignored other muscles, and you have made yourself so stiff, so tight that you can't do normal human function. Of course, you can then convince yourself that normal human function is somehow abnormal, and that level of flexibility is abnormal or only for yogis and ballet dancers. But the reality is your ignoring flexibility is the cause of your not being able to do some very basic things. Now, flexibility in different positions is extremely important, and if you don't train flexibility in a way that balances out what you're doing for your strength work, you're never going to have hips that feel good. If you're really strong in the gym, but you always ignore your flexibility, well, congratulations. That chronic back pain, hip pain, and those slip-on shoes you always feel like you have to wear just to get through the day are your rewards for ignoring your flexibility. Mistake number 4 is ignoring strength work. So let's say you are somebody who is really flexible, you do yoga all the time, you do lots of breath work, and you feel like, yes, relaxation is going to get me feeling loose and comfortable all day long. And the reality is that's not true. If your muscles are really good at getting long, but they're not strong once they're long, you're on the path to having more hip pain. And in fact, I have seen yoga practitioners do this to themselves where they get nice and flexible. They learn how to relax. They go into these deep, deep stretches. They go into the pigeon stretch, and they hang out there for hours and hours, and then suddenly things get so clicky, clunky, and unstable that they can't move their hips well anymore. And then it actually locks up because the muscles are not strong enough to actually control full ranges of motion anymore. So if you're somebody whose strongest muscle is the diaphragm from all that breath work and meditation you're doing, it might be a really good idea to start lifting weights gradually, safely, and progressively. Find somebody to help you understand how to do it, and then gradually introduce it into your life so that your muscles learn how to contract and exert force in the world around you. It's going to make a real big difference to how comfortable your hips feel, because if all you do is sit on your butt and stretch and relax, you're going to find pretty quickly that your butt muscles are gone, your hamstrings are gone, your thigh muscles are gone, and that means you can't move your femur. You can't move your pelvis in the way you want, and everything just feels really, really off. The number 5 mistake that keeps you in hip pain is not training enough. You don't do anything on a regular basis to maintain strength or flexibility, and that is going to result in more hip pain. Most of us in the modern age just do one thing. We sit in cars, we sit at desks, we sit at the computer, we sit in front of our phones on the couch, but that is not enough to maintain healthy ranges of motion. It's not enough to keep our hips feeling good. You will have hip pain, and you should have hip pain if all you do is crush these muscles back here and here. And all that sitting also makes the muscles up here atrophy, and the muscles down here atrophy, and the muscles in your back atrophy, and your shoulder muscles. So if the rest of your body hurts too, don't be surprised, because you haven't been doing anything to maintain appropriate levels of strength or flexibility in your whole body. And if you really aren't doing any kind of training for your hip muscles, I highly encourage you to go to uprighthealth.com/DIY to check out the Healthy Hips program. It'll help you rebuild your hips at home with a practical, powerful schedule and more workouts than you can shake a femur at. So go check it out. Now let's get back to the vid. The number 6 mistake that causes you hip pain is training too much. Some people go to the gym and they want to do the same 4 lifts every single day as hard as they can all the time, and they don't think about muscle balance, and they ignore flexibility. They ignore strengthening things in a balanced way. Remember that if you are only doing the same couple motions all the time and you're doing them intensely all the time, it's going to be really hard for you to re-establish balance in your hip muscles. So if you have hip pain and you're doing this very repetitive workout routine, or you're doing the same couple stretches over and over and over again, remember that you need to back off of what you're doing and put some of your time and energy into something else that balances you out. If you train too much, too hard, in the same way all the time, you are going to end up with hip pain. Your body needs to have a variety of challenges for it to feel capable of doing a lot of different things. If you can't do something as simple as squatting deep, which you would need to do if you were living in the wilderness so that you could poo, then you have literally trained out a basic human position. If you can't do things like touch your toes the way anybody who lives in the wilderness has to do, then you have lost a basic human ability. And you can regain that if you adjust your training to get your body back to that more natural ability. Another example of training too much is playing a sport over and over and over again throughout the week for hours and hours and hours each time, never adequately recovering and never learning how to keep your muscles balanced. This is really common for people who play hockey, for people who play soccer. They're just going to practice, they love the sport, they can't stop, and they don't do anything to make sure that their hip muscles stay balanced and that they can recover and stay flexible for the long run. We're on to mistake number 7, so we're going to need a drum roll. Relying on pills or shots to numb the pain or allegedly speed the healing is another big mistake that keeps you in hip pain. When you start looking for these shots that are going to magically fix your pain, that are going to magically help you heal, you're trying to abdicate responsibility. You're trying to say something that's going on here is not in my control, and it's something that somebody else needs to fix for me. When you numb your body, you use painkillers, either pills or injections, you are actually making a dangerous gamble. You're trying to continue with the activities that have put you in this position already, and you're trying to numb the effects of your normal patterns. So you're now setting yourself up to do more of the imbalancing activity that's causing your hip pain. You need to be aware, you need to be clear and be able to see the relationship between what you're doing with your body and how it causes your hip pain. And then you need to start plotting a new path so that you can actually improve your hip pain with training. If you're looking for a program to help you with your hip training, be sure to go to uprighthealth.com/DIY to check out the Healthy Hips program. It'll help you rebuild your hips at home. Numbing your body just makes it impossible for you to see the relationships between what you do and how your hips feel. So even if you implement a good hip training program, if you're too numb to feel what's going on, you're not going to understand what's happening. You won't know what exercises help, and you will probably just overdo things and make your hips hurt more once the numbing agent wears off. Also, corticosteroid injections for hip pain will eventually rot your hip, so it's probably not a great idea to do that more than once. As for stem cells and PRP injections, I would just caution you to be a little skeptical. I've seen enough failure stories from people who paid big money to get these magical injections and then just ended up with disappointment because their hopeful savior failed to do anything good for them or made them worse. Now, it's possible maybe PRP injections or stem cell injections or whatever the heck might be really helpful, but right now, there's not a lot of evidence to show that. If somebody actually did a study where they compared these types of injections to, say, a placebo, like a saline solution injection, and they showed that these newfangled injections were actually effective at doing something, then I might be convinced. Research has shown that the more you dress up a placebo in fancy lab coats and hype it up with really big sciencey words and make it seem really medically authoritative, the more the placebo works. So if you're going to charge people big money for newfangled injections, at least take some of that huge profit margin towards running studies where you compare those injections to fake placebo injections so you can see whether you're just making people pay for a really expensive placebo or you're actually giving them something that has some real therapeutic value. In the meantime, I'm just going to bet that a lot of this has to do with a very expensive placebo effect. So instead of relying on these injections and hoping and praying that these things are going to take away your hip pain, I think it's better to shift your locus of control. That means you're shifting your attention to what you can control. You're shifting your focus to what is within your area of influence, and you're looking to solve the hip pain yourself. Some psychological research claims that this is actually good for you in many ways, and it's good for your health and all that. But of course, psychological research papers are a little bit, I'll link to one that talks about this because it is interesting to think about. And from an anecdotal standpoint, I've seen that focusing on what I can control in my life and seeing how I have responsibility for my own challenges has been really, really productive and has solved my problems with my body. Whereas shifting my attention to external factors and looking for external solutions has always yielded frustration and disappointment. So I'm hoping that if you have hip pain, you start making this shift towards what you can control rather than obsessing over all the externalities and all the alleged external saviors that are going to fix your hip pain. I believe the best thing you can do is to work on your own hips yourself and learn what your body needs and how it's trying to communicate to you. That will help you solve your hip pain in the long run. If you need help or inspiration on this journey out of hip pain, I encourage you to check the description box for helpful links. I'm going to include links to free workouts that are absolutely 100% free to help you build strength and flexibility in your hip muscles. And if you feel ready or you feel like you need more help, be sure to go to uprighthealth.com/DIY to check out the Healthy Hips program. It's a comprehensive, practical, powerful program to help you with your hip pain. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and share this video with somebody else with hip pain. You can check out more free videos to help you here. And as always, I hope you remember that pain sucks. Life shouldn't.